Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Potter, and I'm here to moderate today's press conference on behalf of the Connected Commerce Council. We are pleased to have some great small businesses with us and also an expert researcher from Advertising Perceptions. There is a question and answer box that reporters and attendees should put questions into, and we will get to those after folks make their opening remarks. I think we're going to probably have about 15 minutes of presentations, and then we will take questions. If folks have questions afterwards, I think you all know that Casey is available to follow up. And if anybody has questions, they can do that with her. In terms of verbal questions, of course, as soon as the presentations are done, we'll open it up and we'll handle those questions first, and then we'll go to questions that folks put in the question and answer box. So why don't we start with the participants? I think, Lauren, you're going to start, and then after that, we'll go to LaKita and Shallon and Clark. Lauren, you've done some great research, and I'm going to turn it over to you I think there's a slide deck. So go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, John.
And please introduce yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Fisher. I'm the GM of Business Intelligence at Advertiser Perceptions. We are a research firm that specializes in advertising. We are constantly talking to the biggest agencies and brands and decision makers in the marketplace to understand what they're thinking. What I'm going to share with you today is some of the research that we conducted back in March and April of this year. And you can advance the slides. There's everyone that you're going to hear speaking today. It's myself as well as 3 small businesses. You can keep advancing. The small businesses are going to share with you very specific information on how they're using personalized digital ads today and the impact that it would have on their businesses if they were no longer able to use these ads. What I'm going to share with you are findings from the study that we conducted a couple of months back, and you can advance slide. So the research that I'm sharing today comes from a study that was completed in March through April of this year. As I said, we surveyed many advertisers and publishers that included SMBs, which were companies with fewer than 500 employees, as well as large national advertisers. And the goal was really to understand how they're using personalized digital advertising today and what their businesses would look like if they were no longer able to use those types of ads to reach the audiences they care about or be able to measure the effectiveness of their digital advertising. There's a lot of information that we got from the study. What I'm going to share with you today are most of the stats that pertain to some of the small businesses. One thing to note before we get started is for all of the respondents in this survey, we made very clear what we meant by personalized digital ads. And so every respondent had to be a decision maker for their company. They had to be involved in digital advertising, and they had to be using personalized digital advertising, which we defined as using basic information like location or device type or user behaviors or interests to either reach the audiences they care about and or measure the success of those advertising effects. So what you're seeing on this slide are some of the highlights from the study. You can see that 3 in 5 say they use these types of ads to grow and expand their business. And when we dug in further, we heard statements like digital advertising and personalized digital advertising in particular lets me reach audiences in a way that I can go head to head with large national brands. Small businesses aren't going to advertise with the Super Bowl. They're not going to take out a big national print campaign, but they can advertise side by side with national advertisers in digital realms, reaching and vying for the same attention and audiences as those national brands. 7 and 10 are using these ads to find new customers. And 3 and 5 specifically are using these ads to reach local customers. That's really important as well, right? It gives them the ability to extend their reach in their local environments by using that data to have a broader footprint than they would just have through basic email campaigns or direct marketing campaigns or word of mouth. And so when we looked at all of these and we asked specifically about what effect this was having on real tangible metrics like revenue, we found 82% said that they directly attributed revenue growth in 2023 to personalized ads. Next slide. So we then asked what would happen if you were no longer able to use personalized ads. And we found some pretty significant statements and percentages. 1 in 5 said they'd be forced to close, and a similar portion said they'd be forced to lay off staff. Nearly half also said they would have to raise their prices. It might seem like a big leap if we're talking about limiting the use of one type of advertising vehicle for businesses to see these types of consequences. But as you saw on the earlier slide, 82% said they can directly attribute revenue to the use of these ads. If they can't use these ads, they're not reaching as many customers and they're having difficulty measuring the effects of that, and that has real impacts on their businesses. Next slide. And then we asked publishers as well, right? How is this impacting those who are providing us with the content online that we all rely on every day? And you can see that some of the effects were even more significant. 37% of publishers said that they would face layoffs or closure. 45% said they'd have to implement paywalls. And 2/3 said they would increase the number of ads they show to consumers. So what does this mean for us as consumers? It means that we either need to pay or would need to pay for more content that we would want to access, and or we would see more ads as a result of the limitation of some of the data types that are used to personalize ads and to measure the effectiveness. So as I mentioned, that's just a highlight of some of the key findings from this research. I encourage you to read the full study. As I said, though, what we really found in the research is that these forms of advertising are really critical for small businesses. And I'm now going to turn it over or back to you, John, so that we can hear directly from the small businesses.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I am really happy to turn it over to LaKita Anderson, who runs a fabulous small business in Florida. So LaKita, if you can tell us a little about your business, how you use digital advertising, how it supports your business, and if you want to speak to the legislation on Capitol Hill, the American Privacy Rights Act, or to other bills that we've talked about, that would be useful also.
Hi, everyone. I'm LaKita Anderson. I'm an online food blogger based in Panama City Beach, Florida. I run a recipe website called Simply LaKita. So we share modern comfort food recipes with a twist. So think about your grandmother's recipes, but just made very simple to get you in and out of the kitchen. I started blogging in 2013 as a hobby, but by 2016, I knew I wanted to pretty much dedicate my life to food. In the beginning, I was able to partner with brands through partnerships and influencer campaigns, but that required a lot of negotiations, contracts, legwork, meeting with marketing and PR professionals. Within a year of doing this, I had surpassed my corporate income and decided I wanted to quit my job, which I was not in love with, and focus on working for myself full-time and making my blog a success and a source of income. However, brand partnerships, they do require a lot of legwork, showing up and really just being present. And I quickly became burnt out in doing this. And so I decided that I just wanted to really just focus on my blog and monetizing through digital ads. So my 700,000 plus readers, including my 15,000 Instagram followers, now they're able just to click through my website, find the recipes that they want and that they love, They see ads for products that are relevant to them, and the advertisers get the anonymous data about our readership, so they know that their ads are delivered to the audience that they desire. Recently, actually, I think it was this month, I was honored to meet with staff from Representative Neil Dunn and Representative Craig's office and participate in a Hill briefing to educate on the importance of digital ads for my business and how APRA could hurt and really just impact my business. I believe that APRA misses the mark because it really doesn't balance consumer privacy and small business needs. My business basically makes money from ads that we sell on the website, and APRA would make it harder, if not really impossible, to collect the data that's needed to attract advertisers and show them that like their money is well spent by advertising on my website.
Thank you, LaKita. Next, we're going to turn to Shallon Thomas and your fabulous TW Totes business. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Shallon Thomas. I am the COO of TW Tote, twtote.com. And we primarily sell any kind of bags that you can expect to use over the course of, let's say, a weekend or headed to work. So lunch bags, toiletry bags, backpacks, so forth and so on. And we try to do so in a sustainable manner. We are 100% e-commerce at this point. So the only way for me to get new customers is either through social media ads or primarily pay-per-click ads that you would get on Google or Bing, so forth and so on. The thing is that as a small business, I am swimming in an ocean of other advertisers that have 10 times more money than I do. So problem number one for me is it's already super expensive because I am competing against folks that have way more budget than I do. So I have to be very, very specific on who I advertise to. So I need to look at age ranges. I need to look at where these folks live, all of those things, comparing it to my own data to make a decision on where I'm willing to fight with the whales that have the advertising budget. So effectively, if I'm not able to choose a location or I'm able to choose an age range, advertising would no longer make sense for me. All my sales would dry up and we would unfortunately go out of business. The other side of that coin is sometimes I literally have to tell my finance folks, hey, listen, I know this advertising is really expensive, but because we can at least decide who we're going to advertise to, we're willing to take the chance, even though we may not break even on selling the first product. So the other side of that coin is, even if I don't break even on the first product, if I have the ability to then reach back to that customer and say, well, hey, you need to complete your set. Here's the backpack for the lunchbox that you bought. That also is a way of driving income. So many times it is not a matter of me just advertising. It's a matter of me advertising to the right people at the right time at a cost that I can afford, and then making sure I can reach back to them so that even if I am not breaking even the first time, that over the life cycle of that customer and the relationship I build with them, that I do become profitable.
Thanks, Shallon. I really appreciate your life cycle and long-term vision and how the advertising plays into that. Clark Twiddy from North Carolina, do you want to share with us some of the story of your business and how you have used digital advertising to grow?
Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. Those are two tough acts to follow. LaKita, Shallon, I loved your presentation, so thank you. Clark Twiddy from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and I am fortunate to be the president of a small family business named Twiddy & Company, and we are about to celebrate almost 50 years of being in business, and we try to attract people from all over the United States to come to a very narrow stretch of now famous sandbars to spend what we hope are among the best weeks of their lives. And for the great majority of our company's history, we have been rooted in a personal interaction around personal service and hospitality. And particularly since the pandemic, we have changed our approach like so many small businesses. And now our challenge is to digitize Southern hospitality. And to do that, we rely on digital tools. And in fact, we have a weekly meeting, our most well-attended weekly meeting, headed up by a gentleman just off camera here named Cole, in which we walk into a room and we ask, what is working? And Cole describes things like click-through rates, open rates, return on ad spend. What's working? Because in our competitive environment, behind every worthy competitor we have is a repeatable process that allows us to engage with our customers, not just as data points, but as human beings. And I know we'll talk a lot more about that today. Along with my colleagues in this presentation, I as well had an opportunity recently to walk up to Capitol Hill and spend some time not only with both of our United States senators, but also members of our congressional delegation. Congressman Greg Murphy represents what is the second largest coastal region in America. And I believe APRA is well-intentioned. We do believe in a national privacy law that would supersede what is currently 20 individual state privacy laws. And the analogy there is, imagine driving from Virginia down to Florida and needing a driver's license in every state in order to drive through that state. And yet that's exactly what we're doing when it comes to privacy. And I also think we have opportunities around private rights of action and data minimization. That's a tough word to understand. But if you've been in business for any length of time, the chances of you interacting with more than 200,000 customers, as the law cites, is actually pretty good. So we think there are great opportunities there. John, I'll kick it back to you. I know we've got a lot of great questions. Thank you again to 3C for allowing us to participate in what I think is a very important national conversation. John, back to you.
Thanks, Clark, and thanks to everybody. I want to remind folks, I actually made a mistake in my opening remarks. Please go ahead and put your questions in the box. If you can type them out, that would be great. So we're not going to do verbal questions, but I do want to key off this data minimization point and give folks a chance to answer this question. Right, when you talk to the proponents, the folks who are in favor of data minimization, they say things like business should have the right to use my data, the customer's data, to deliver us the precise service or product that we requested. And that seems to be a rational dividing line, right? And they don't want their data used for other things. Can you talk about how you use the data in a way, for instance, LaKita, as a publisher, your customers' data, right? Are they asking you for advertisements, right? How would you be, if you couldn't use customer data, any customer data beyond what it is they precisely asked for, could you make any money at all? How would you price your ads, and how would you build a business off of that?
That would actually be very difficult for us to do, if not impossible. I feel like the data needs to be collected to serve those targeted ads. Without me being able to monetize my blog through digital ads, I would probably have to look at other ways to generate revenue for my business, such as going behind a paywall or a subscription-based model, something like that.
So a raw count of how many customers or how many visitors you have isn't enough to monetize in a way that'll keep you from having to go back to a corporate America.
No. Sad to say, but no, it really isn't.
And Clark, can you talk about what you do if I come in and I rent a place from you for a week, right? What are the other non-threatening uses of data, of customer data, that you might want to be doing that perhaps are going to be prohibited by this data minimization challenge?
That's a great question. I love the topic of conversation. Let's define data. I think what the proponents of data minimization think about perhaps is a name or an email address. And it's counterintuitive to a degree, but that's not the most important piece of data to us until you've made a decision to purchase. What we're interested in, to answer your question, is trend analysis. So for example, if we target Philadelphia versus Pittsburgh, we'll do what businesses all over the world do. We'll look to maximize revenue and minimize cost and deploy resources effectively and efficiently. So if Philadelphia converts at a much higher rate than Pittsburgh, we may choose to allocate resources differently. We may look at the route you chose to take to the Outer Banks, the time of year you chose to take to the Outer Banks, and build personas and similarities around your experience that are able to be turned into a replicable process for other people. And in fact, you may have visited our website, in which case we may choose to try to follow you and show you similar ads to what you most recently experienced, because we believe if you had a great stay, you're much more likely to repeat that stay, a repeat guest, than perhaps someone who's never visited the Outer Banks. And that's very much a question related to resources around efficiency and effectiveness. It's a great question. Needless to say, we rely on those digital tools to make efficient resource allocations as we compete with Airbnb, for example, which the last time I checked was about $160 billion. We don't have those kinds of resources, but we can compete directly, as Lauren alluded to, by being agile as it comes to resource deployment and efficient dollar spend.
Clark, I'm going to ask you one more question that just popped into my head. You've been in business 50 years. How has your advertising spend changed? And are you spending more or less proportionate to the size of your business? And so how has your return changed as you've gone more digital? And then what do you think would be the impact if, for instance, these very strict data minimization rules in APRA were come to pass, were enacted?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and it's a little counterintuitive. Some things still work just like they did in 1978. 10% of our reservations are booked on signs. For example, the same signs that have always worked. It wasn't that long ago that running an ad in the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, was considered the very peak of advertising. And yet, we learn from our customers, and our customers have clearly indicated a desire to engage with us on the technology and the device and the platform of their choosing. And that overwhelmingly is digital. So even in the past 10 years, our resource allocations, our marketing budgets have overwhelmingly shifted over to digital platforms and digital tools. We hardly spend literally any money on what I'll call print, what I'll call legacy news organizations. And that's not a knock on them. I still read those papers. But in terms of listening and learning from our customers, they clearly want us to engage with them on digital devices with relevant content based on their preferences they have expressed to us.
Thank you. And Lauren, you've talked to customers, you've talked to small businesses, you talked to big businesses also. Does your research, and I don't know if it's this research product or another one, document dissonance amongst those communities, or is there actually general agreement among those communities with respect to advertising quality and whether folks who are on the receiving end of those ads are feeling offended by creepiness or other things that proponents of data minimization and APRA suggest? You're on mute, Lauren.
I'm on mute. So great question, John. Thank you. When you think about some of the things that we often hear about advertising, the negatives, right? The creepiness factor. It's certainly something that comes up in a lot of conversations. When we look at some of our research on the advertiser side, it's very comparable to what we're seeing in this study. And that is that advertisers of all sizes and publishers of all sizes rely heavily on targeting personalization data to reach the customers they care about and measure the effectiveness of their ads. They also genuinely believe that if it's done correctly, and to Clark's point and LaKita's point, right, creating a relevant experience, doing something that's additive, then it will be a positive experience for the consumer. And when we ask them, even sometimes we ask these questions of the advertisers as consumers, that's what we get back. So yes, there is an effect of creepiness associated with this. And I think it's not uncommon, right, when people talk about it to say things like, I was talking about this and then I saw an ad for it, right? There's a lot of those types of conversations that happen. But when we're talking about, especially the use of this type of information for small businesses, those are the exceptions, right? Those are the outliers. That's not what we're looking at here. What we're really looking at is the use of information to make sure that you're creating a meaningful customer or consumer experience, because these businesses have found that if you do that, in turn, it will lead to value for you, right? It's the value exchange.
Shallon, talk about your value exchange. You get a customer, you obviously have different personas, different profiles, generic profiles of the types of customers that come to you and where they're located, talk about how you advertise and how you deliver value with those advertisements.
Yeah, so based on who we know converts, kind of having that extra information to know the general ages, the locations, what they may be into, I can now make sure that the ads that I'm providing specifically to those people, because I'm targeting just them specifically, speaks to them directly, right? It's words that they would use, it's imagery that they're used to seeing, so that when they do get it and that they're in the target demographic that I'm looking for, it's kind of like the shoe perfectly fits, right? So comments that I've received before is like, wow, I saw your ad, the bag was amazing. It's exactly what I was looking for. And that is the key component that I'm always trying to get to. And then from there, I'm trying to now nurture that relationship. I'm trying to grow with that person. So having their information now, it helps me continue that trending of understanding exactly who they are. So I can now reach out to them in email and say, hey, I know you like that, but based on the data that we have, we're pretty confident that you'll also like this. And or even if I'm writing blogs, I can speak to them directly and give some extra value there versus just having to try and bring a broad scope to everything, because I have no idea who I'm really talking to, what they're into, and there's nothing for me to look as far as trends. There's nothing for me to really look at.
And Shallon, when you do those sorts of planning and buying, are you focused on individual personas and like literally individuals and their data, or are you advertising sort of through more generically in patterns and personas?
Yeah, so I tend to use patterns and then turn them into personas. So I'm looking at ages, I'm looking at sex, I'm looking at location. In some cases, you're even looking at the person's income level, right? And over time, those things start to tell you where you're going to get your best bang for your buck. Your pay per click makes the world of difference, because that's the difference between targeting a professional between the ages of 25 and 45 that is in a metropolitan area, which is typically who's going to buy and love my bag at the price point, right? And where I deliver the most value, versus there's a 5-year-old on mom's laptop and the bag is pretty. And every time they click, I'm paying an additional X amount of dollars for that click, and they'll never purchase from me. So it's very, very important to kind of look at the data for us from a higher level. Where are we getting the best bang for our buck? Then turn that into specific personas that we can then speak to each persona and hyper target and hyper focus.
LaKita, can you talk about the difference between selling contextual advertising, people who like food, versus selling data-driven advertising, and how that affects your bottom line?
The way it impacts me is so that more data-driven, it's really like a customized, relevant experience. So people would come into my website, they would search for the recipe that they want, and it would be ads based on products that they already use, love, and just enjoy overall. If that went away and it was a more contextual experience, then they would probably see ads that wouldn't be like relevant to them. I kind of always put it in the mindset of, sometimes I have a dad that's 80 years old. And so sometimes I forget, that I'm logged in on his account or something, and I'll see ads for things like razors and, just, therapeutic shoes, orthopedic shoes, and just random things that aren't really relevant to me. They're not ads that I really would be interested in and want to see. And that's how that contextual experience really would be. It just isn't relevant, and it is products that I'm just not interested in.
Clark, when I visit your website, do you use my pre-existing data to ever show me a different front page or to show me different things I'd like? And is that about my data? Is that based on my data or sort of aggregated data?
I love that question. And particularly in an age of AI, you can't have a Zoom call these days without talking about AI and machine learning. We believe very deeply in personalized recommendations and personalized experiences. So the answer is, it will depend upon your experience. Are you a recent guest? So as a very practical example, if when you choose to visit the Outer Banks, you always stay in the same community and you've done that for a period of time, why would we show you something that you have expressed no preference in choosing? And the restaurant analogy is, in many cases, so many of our favorite restaurants are where they remember us and they remember what we may prefer on the menu. Clark, would you like the same thing as last time? So the ability to remember what you liked and show you more things like that is very important to us. And we also believe you're much more likely to purchase those items that we may share with you. So to answer your question, it is based on aggregate data around your experience, unless you are an existing customer and have shared a lot of information with us at your choosing, and we're able to show you very specific things that we think resonate and are relevant to your purchase decision.
Shallon, how does Clark's commentary sound to you in the way that you're doing your advertising, as well as the way visitors come to your website and the experiences they have?
I mean, I couldn't have honestly said it better myself, right? I mean, you really need to make sure that you're hyper-focused on first understanding the trends, but then being able to speak to that specific person. But you can only speak to that specific person if you understand the overall trends first, so you can kind of get into their mind almost a little bit to understand exactly what would be of interest to them. So what we do is very similar. I'm going to then advertise to you after the fact based on what I know. People that look like you and fit your demographic are more than likely to convert on next. And I'm also going to try and find ways to add value. Even if you're not buying something else from me, I have a good idea of what you may be interested in. So I'm going to remind you that I'm here and help build my brand and the relationship by offering value to you. Hey, if you're looking to go in this location, a lot of folks from your location go there with our bags, reminding them that we exist. You should consider these things. Oh, wow, I didn't think of that. Love it, so forth and so on. But now when I hit you with, make sure to bring this bag, you're like, you know what? I'll think about that. But again, it's all kind of coming in from trending data that you can now tailor fit to that individual, having a better understanding of the whole picture.
Lauren, anything you want to add from your research, from this study or others, that would tie any of this together? You're on mute again.
You would think this is my first Zoom meeting ever. One thing I want to add based on the conversation we've had is, in all of these examples that you shared, you've highlighted the importance of having a variety of different inputs about what somebody likes, what they've done in the past, what they do, to be able to personalize an experience for them. But, John, going back to your point about the constant, advertising is creepy and things like that, I think when we're thinking about the word creepy, as consumers, we're thinking about this as if, you know exactly it's me, Lauren Fisher. And that's not what's happening, right? It's, that there is a user or a person that has exhibited these behaviors or likes these things or has interacted with your content in some way. But, Clark, to your point, it's not that you're necessarily thinking about or my name or know my name. So I think, as we think about all of this, it's really important to keep in mind that there are very different types of data, right? And some of them are very important for powering or very useful for powering forms of digital advertising. And those aren't necessarily the types of information that are as sensitive as some consumers might think.
Great. Let's do one quick round the room and we'll close it out. So LaKita, do you want to start us off? Anything else you'd like to add to wrap this up? No, you're good? All righty. Shallon?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I truly hope that everything we mentioned will be considered, because small businesses like mine will go out of business if we lose some of these capabilities. So thanks again, and I'm hoping for the changes that we need.
Thank you, Shallon. And Clark, I'm going to give you the last word.
John, that's very kind of you. Thank you all for the opportunity to join in this conversation. Two quick thoughts. One thing we've heard a little bit about in the APRA legislation is something called private rights of action. And I'm certainly not an attorney, but as I understand that, I think the intention is once again good. The intention is to reduce the burden on some federal administrative organizations to help the private sector solve some of the complexity around this law. And that intent is good. But I think it's the wrong audience. The audience, I don't always think, should be the federal government. I think the audience should be taxpayers and small businesses who are working to make sure that they're able to exceed in the minds of their customers and grow their business. So I think private rights of action are well-intentioned, but it's very slippery to have negative unintended consequences. That's number one. Number two, any small business operator, I think, in America would probably agree with this. When we think about growing businesses, we think about opportunity. In fact, opportunity comes from growth. And we're able to attract and sustain talented people in our organizations. You heard me mention a gentleman named Cole. Cole is a data scientist. And the idea of having a data scientist in rural North Carolina certainly doesn't rise to top of mind unless we're able to use the same technology that places like Austin, San Francisco, Boston use. So we're able to attract and retain talent because of our ability to use digital tools. So when we think about APRA, we tend to think about consumers. Let's broaden our thinking. How does this affect the employees of companies and our ability to grow small businesses? And I think that's very important. As we all know, small businesses are collectively an enormous driver in the American economy, and opportunity that comes from small business is not something I think we'd all agree to be taking lightly. Having said that, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, LaKita. Thank you, Shallon, for allowing me to join in with you this afternoon.
So I'm gonna reverse myself only to say if anybody wants to add any questions into the Q&A box, please go ahead and do it. And also, I'm going to throw something into the chat that everybody can see. I'm not biased towards any media channel compared to another, but the Wall Street Journal just published a story a few days ago about a law firm that has filed thousands of lawsuits against website bloggers and other folks, small business websites, for failing to comply with Americans for Disability Act rules. And of course, he then settles with them for, just several $1,000s each. And the owner of the law firm said something effective: if I filed 3,000 lawsuits against these small businesses, that's not enough, and there's more work to do. So certainly private rights of action under the ADA are spurring lawsuits. Private rights of action under the patent laws spurred a lot of lawsuits, and we characterize those folks as patent trolls. I think there's a great fear among small businesses on data privacy laws having private rights of action. So I'm going to throw that into the chat in case anybody wants to read that article. And if there's no more questions, we will wrap this up. And thanks everybody for participating. Thanks everybody for attending.